Behind much of this is that you look at people like Bernini, the sculptor, and Raphael, and Dan Brown postulates or puts forward this idea that they may have been members of this secret organization, the Illuminati. My research has shown that that is undoubtedly not the case. People like Bernini and Raphael were God-fearing folk.
They were kind of coming around at that period of the age of reason and enlightenment, and when a lot of scientists such as Galileo were pursuing knowledge that was outside the purview of the Catholic Church and using rationality and scientific method to get at what they saw as deeper, larger, grander truths.
Those larger, grander truths were sought after by more than just Renaissance scientists.
This is a war that's been going on for a long time for control of the planet. How do you fight such a war?
Rome is today, and has been for centuries, the seat of the Catholic Church, which means the fundamental center of the Christian faith. It is a mixture of many other sources from Egypt, from Africa, and from all over the planet.
Symbols from other ancient lands cover the city of Rome. It's one reason Dan Brown said angels and demons there. Another is its massive treasure of artwork. Art historian Betty Brown suggests both were used to convey covert messages. Some might have even been on the fictitious path of illumination.
Bernini, as the Illuminati artist, used Egyptian motifs so much in his work, and that's because there was, at the time that he was working, very much a vogue for things Egyptian, for Egyptian symbols.
Since he chose Bernini as the central character in Rome, it's particularly good. The Baroque period was a time in which Western culture was centered around the production of images. Rome was the picture-making center of the entire civilization. Bernini was a superstar on that stage.
Superstar might be an understatement. Bernini was one of the most famous artists of all time. Working in the 1600s, he designed the famous columns in St. Peter's Square and the 140 intimidating saints that stare down from him.
Bernini as an artist may well have actually embedded within much of his artwork certain symbols and ideas that the church would have seen as kind of in opposition to their standpoint at the time. But I think that just like Raphael, Bernini's markers or symbols themselves were really just talking about these new scientific ideas, the ideas of Copernicus and Galileo, and incorporating them within the artwork.
The Church of Santa Maria del Popolo is a site, like many churches in Rome, that has a deep history. It's an important place for the Illuminati, if the Illuminati master is going to be Bernini, because it has two major Bernini sculptures. It has a Bernini sculpture of Daniel and a pairing of an angel and Habakkuk. And the angel has come to Habakkuk to tell him to rescue or help Daniel. And the angel is pointing in one direction. Habakkuk, resisting for a moment, is pointing in another direction. And Dan Brown uses the angel and Habakkuk sculpture to suggest that the angel is pointing in the direction of the next clue. So that's a first major step on his fictional path of the Illuminati.
Another location on Dan Brown's path of illumination? Bernini's Four Rivers Fountain. It's the southwestern tip of the path's cross over the Tiber River. And at the center of this Baroque masterwork is this, a large obelisk. Did Bernini purposefully place this pagan object here as some type of signal?
The obelisk at the center of the Four Rivers Fountain is another one of the ancient obelisks that were brought to Rome, and it lay in another side of the city, but under dirt and years of debris. The Pope who patronized Bernini and created that fountain was Innocent X, who wanted to create a monument at the center of that piazza, which was, in a sense, his kind of family turf. His family's palace is right adjacent to it. Wanted a monument that marked the center of the piazza and glorified him and the church as well.
An interesting question, though, is why Bernini used Egyptian motifs so much in his work.
It's a question that has intrigued conspiracy theorists for centuries.
In the Fountain of the Four Rivers, each of the human figures represents a river, and so it's accompanied by symbols designating which river that is. Those are the more overt symbols, but Bernini could have hidden all manner of other little tricks in there had he chosen to do so.
But it isn't the fountain that has most historians perplexed. It's this sculpture, often considered Bernini's masterpiece. And it's right on the eastern end of Dan Brown's path of illumination. It hardly seems like an accident.
The Ecstasy of St. Teresa is one of Bernini's most extraordinary works. The sculptural group is the centerpiece of an entire ensemble, a chapel that Bernini designed for the Cornaro family, a wealthy Venetian family. And it illustrates or gives form to one of the most remarkable passages in her writings that describes one of her many encounters with the divine.
It's the tip of the arrow that allegedly holds an Illuminati clue: fire, one of the four elements. The Illuminati were early scientists. Earth, wind, fire, and water were the elements with which they worked. And in Dan Brown's book, each was used to kill a cardinal. Did the Illuminati truly use their most important symbols for such a frightening means?
Teresa of Avila is a fabulous woman from Christian history. Santa Teresa reformed the Carmelite order, allowing women who weren't incredibly privileged to enter the convent by basically working their way through rather than coming in with such an immense dowry that it would pay for their room and board for their entire lives. She traveled all over Spain founding the convents, and during her life had several visionary experiences.
St. Teresa of Avila was in many ways the poster child of the Catholic Reformation, and her experience, her ecstasy, there was this new emphasis on having an emotional experience of piety, an emotional experience of God and of Jesus.
This artist outlived 8 popes, 8 benefactors. This allowed Bernini to create much of the most valued artwork throughout the Vatican, including the famous St. Peter's Square. But another Renaissance artist may also have left similar secret messages in his works: Raphael. Only it wasn't with obelisks or spears of fire. And one anchors yet another arm of the cross on the path of illumination.
Well, the pyramids in the Chigi Chapel are fairly unique in terms of Renaissance tomb imagery and form. They were actually designed by Raphael, who was the architect and designer of the chapel in the 16th century, the early 16th century. And they were very much meant to evoke the grandeur of ancient Rome and earlier civilizations still. When Raphael designed those tombs, he was very much thinking about the symbolic meaning of the pyramid, going back to Egyptian and ancient Roman culture. And in its form, it embodied kind of perfection on the one hand, and on the other, the idea of salvation and eternity.
Dan Brown appropriated this site for the Illuminati as yet another clue: the element of earth. Does this make Raphael a conspirator?
I think it's highly possible that any of these incredible creative geniuses could have been a member of a secret society. Certainly could have been true for Raphael, certainly could have been true for Bernini.
And I think that Bernini and Raphael and many of the artists at the time would have been seen in modern terms as reformers. They still relied fundamentally upon the church. They were still God-fearing folk. They would have seen these ideas, the very idea of a secret society, as anathema, but they were reformers, and they wanted to bring forward some of these new scientific ideas. And I think that's what Dan Brown is really getting at with a lot of his work within Angels and Demons.
While Bernini and Raphael lived long before the Illuminati were known, other